3 riders urged their horses up a rough, twisting path into the green mountains north of Malbrisa. The early evening sun was at their backs, and a dozen liveried horsemen were on their trail in hot pursuit. The lead rider of the 3 was dark-haired, olive-skinned, lithe, and dressed in a rust-red shirt and black leggings ending in black boots. 2 daggers hung on his belt, and a rapier swung from his hip. He glanced back at the pursuing riders, and his vulpine face grimaced. He pulled at the reins with his leather-gloved hands to spur his black horse harder up the path. The second rider was a woman with light brown skin. She wore a tunic of sea green and brown leggings tucked into soft leather boots. A bronze circlet held back her long, wavy black hair, and her sleek, lovely face bore the slightly slanted features and high cheekbones of a woman of Kulan. Her face betrayed no emotion, but only reflected the exertion of her tan mare's movement. At her hip was a curved knife, and a short, gently curving sword was strapped to her saddle. The last rider was a foot taller than both, with wild black hair and bronze skin covered in the blue tattoos of an Indari warrior. He wore a dark blue sleeveless shirt, umber leggings, and brown boots. Circlets of bronze clasped his lean iron limbs as he guided his chestnut horse upward. His blue-gray eyes were those of a hunted wolf. A hunting knife was strapped to his thigh, and a long sword hung from his saddle. A bow was strapped across his chest, and a quiver of arrows to his back. The poet-swordsman, Darien Vin, the Kulanese dancer, Malika, and the Indari warrior, known as Blue, had left the eastbound Venture Road hours before to avoid an unexpected battle between the troops of 2 warring nobles of Malbrisa. Their destination was Malika's homeland of Kulan, still more than a week's ride southeast. They hoped their forced detour north of the road would steer them clear of conflict, but they had been seen by a small troop belonging to one army and attacked as enemies or simply as bystanders whose horses, weapons, and provisions could aid in the civil strife. Even though Blue had felled one of the soldiers with an arrow as they fled, this had not deterred the warriors, but only added revenge to the small troop's hostile motivations. As they reached the crest of the hill, the rough path they ascended led through a gap between 2 enormous rocks that seemed to have been one boulder cleft in 2 only moments before by the burning blade of the descending sun. Darien passed through first. On the other side, the path was less clear. He descended in a steeper and more winding angle between black rock into a deep, oblong canyon whose bottom was carpeted by dark evergreen woods. Darien caught a glimpse of a river running west to east and disappearing through what seemed from this distance a narrow gap on the other side, about a mile away. The black walls of the canyon formed steep, foreboding cliffs to which little vegetation clung. The tops of the cliffs to the east were crowned in the sun's gold like laurel leaves, and the canyon below was falling ever deeper into gloom. After Darien had descended about a stone's throw down the serpentine path, he heard Blue hiss. He paused and turned in the saddle. Malika had stopped as well. The Indari pulled off his bow and nocked an arrow, aiming at the crest of the path above. "That didn't dissuade them before," said Darien.
"It can't hurt,"
said Blue, "unless you hit someone." They watched and waited. The soldiers had been about 20 horse lengths behind. Tense seconds ticked by, then minutes. Darien frowned. "They weren't that far behind us." After another minute, Blue grunted and strapped his bow back around him. "Guess they decided we weren't worth the trouble. Who told them?" They continued their descent, keeping an eye on the gap in the crest, but no soldiers appeared.
"Why did they attack us anyway?"
asked Malika.
"Probably wanted our horses."
"And our weapons and supplies,"
"And maybe you,"
said Blue to Malika.
"You men.
What's that supposed to mean?"
Your aggression knows no bounds."
"Our aggression? Don't rope us in with those scoundrels."
If you were engaged in that conflict, would you act differently?
"We did mercenary work once. Never again."
You men always find some reason to fight and kill.
Those aren't flowers clasped to your belt and saddle, my dear, said Darian, gesturing at her curved knife and sword.
We women are forced to live thus in this world you made.
We didn't make it, we inherited it, said Darian, waving his hand in a defensive gesture. Malika shook her head.